All right, so I'm not sure if you noticed, but pretty much every transition between each sequence in the main edit, the camera was panning downwards before it did anything. And you can see that here, and we're pretty much going to start this sequence the exact same because I like how the camera just comes in and then it starts following text. It creates for a pretty cool transition. So we're gonna do this in the camera layer here. But really quickly, what I wanna do is I actually wanna add a warp onto this text, just a standard warp. With these settings, so I got arc upper, horizontal, and bend is 30. I did it for all the yellow text in the edit, and it just gives it a bit more of a grand look. So now let's get straight into animating this camera. So I'm going to go to R, and we're rotating on the X-axis. So if I move this X-axis, you can see now the render times are horrible. So first things first, this is what I do every time, is I put the quality to 3rd and I turn off all the color correction. And now when I rotate it, you can see that it's a lot more responsive. And we're gonna go ahead and move this so it's just out of the screen, maybe a little bit more. And we're gonna rotate that back to 0. So now the text is pretty much animating in like that. At least at one point, I always want the text to be centered. So every text sort of gets its like moment to shine. And this way, not only is it appealing to the viewer because they can sort of read everything as it's happening, but it's also a nice way to keep everything structured. And I'm gonna go ahead and use the flow plugin. So you're probably gonna laugh at my library, but my presets are YOLO, Meta, Yep, Yoop, and Weep. So I don't really use a whole lot of presets, but the YOLO and the Meta are the ones I use the most. But since we're only animating one parameter, I'm just gonna go ahead and animate it manually. So we're gonna start off real sharp and go in steep. Still really basic stuff here, so a lot of you might really know what you're doing, but once we start stringing the animations together and all that, that's when my method really starts to shine. By the way, the CC particle world, the particles haven't even spawned in at the start of the layer, so what I normally do is I just drag this layer back a little bit, and now you can see all these particles are appearing because the particles have had time to actually come to life. So we have this simple camera animation. Now what I'm going to do is animate the text. Now there's certain things you can and can't do with extrude. I'm assuming most people don't have extrude, so I'm not going to go into too much details, but basically I'm going to animate this text. I'm going to animate the scale because you can't actually animate the opacity letter by letter with this plugin. If you're just using a normal text layer and you're just using 2D text, you can animate the text however you want. I'm gonna do scale at 0, open up the range selector and the offset. I'm just gonna keyframe that at 0 and go to 100. And because the word hello has 5 letters in it, I'm going to make the animation 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frames long so that each frame a letter appears. And that's pretty much sort of like a cheat way you can animate each letter on with the extrude plugin. All right, and that's looking pretty cool. I actually want some motion with this text as well because it's looking very static. So we're gonna go ahead and press R and we're going to keyframe the XYZ, and we're gonna go to the start and we're going to just mess with some values. So normally I just sort of make it up. So I just plus 60, let's go negative 40, and let's go maybe negative 13. And this is sort of where the flow plugin shines. So I'm just gonna highlight these batches of 3 keyframes, and I'm going to hit that graph there. I'm just gonna click apply, and now all those keyframes automatically have this graph here, which is just awesome. Let's have a look at this. I might need to bring this back a little bit. Click apply again. So once again, I always have these 3 keyframes highlighted. If I want to change anything with the animation, I just change it in the flow plugin. I click apply and all the keyframes automatically set. So you could do this manually, but once we start getting into batches of 6 keyframes, it gets a nightmare. You're gonna want that plugin. All right, so that's looking pretty cool. What I might do, let's move it this way, maybe a bit like that, and maybe we can move that down there. And we're also going to move that a bit over there. Click apply. Let's see how this is looking. All right, that's actually not looking too bad. So hello. I might actually extend this out a little bit and then just extend the graph. So something I like to do with my animations is have them a lot longer than they need to be, but that last sort of like 30%, it's not really doing anything. It's only just the subtlest little bit of movement. And this is gonna be really important when we start animating the camera. It's just a bunch of keyframes just constantly overlapping each other. And because the animation's never stopping, you get all this smooth movement. So I'm extending these keyframes here to make sure the text sort of stays moving as we're moving on to the next text. So everything's sort of moving and flowing together. But yeah, let's go ahead and move this over a little bit here. Let's see what this looks like. Yeah, so that's looking quite nice. Let's turn on our color correction layers and let's see what this is actually looking like as a first animation. That's looking pretty good. Remember, you can still do this with just a standard text layer, make it a 3D layer, and do the same animation as I've done here. You just won't have the extrusion that the extrude plugin gives me. But yeah, as a starting animation, I'm really happy with this. Let's move on to the next tutorial where we start stringing all the animations together. And this is where my method of animating 3D camera in After Effects really comes into play.